Jim Shields, and I've served as a committee chair for Ben Washburn and his thesis project, The Color of Ash, Transforming a Mid-Century Building into a School of Archaeology. Committee has been composed of Jim Wasley, William Krueger, and myself. We also have 4 reviewers with us this afternoon. Aparna Dhareshwar. Aparna has been practicing at Sameep Padora Architects and has been a visiting faculty at the Academy of Architecture in Mumbai. We also have Palmyra Geraki, faculty at University of Illinois in Chicago, both an architect and educator, where she's practicing in her own firm. And Carey Clouse, University of Massachusetts at Amherst, teaching and practicing in both architecture and in landscape architecture. And last but not least, our new faculty at the UW-Milwaukee, Trudy, who again is both an architect and an educator. So without further delay, Ben Washburn.
All right, thanks, Jim. Before I get started, I am going to turn off my video just because I've been having some connection issues, and then I'll turn it back on when I'm done. So, hello, I'm Ben Washburn. I am a 2-year grad at UWM, and my thesis project focuses on adaptive reuse and historic preservation to bring a school of archaeology into southern Italy. Now, southern Italy is barren of any sort of archaeology school, and considering the Vale of Mount Vesuvius is one of the most valuable series of archaeology sites of the Mediterranean, it is kind of surprising that there are no schools to accommodate not only researchers, but students as well. By creating a study abroad school for archaeology, students will have a more secure spot to learn and live. Using the Institute as the home of this school would be advantageous because the academic setting it already holds, and because it is the headquarters for the Restoring Ancient Stabia Foundation. Turning the Institute into a study abroad school for archaeology would not only provide students a place to learn and live, it would also allow them to immerse themselves into Italian culture, both current and ancient. I had the opportunity to study abroad last summer. I spent 3 weeks laser scanning the Vesuvian Institute, and after nearly 700 scans, we finished our mission. Now it is the focus of my thesis, and hopefully someday it can become something even better. Now, even though I was only there for 3 weeks, I was able to get out of the Institute and explore the surrounding towns and villas. It was, quite frankly, a phenomenal experience, and this is a photo I took of the Amalfi Coast, which is right close by. I also had the opportunity to hike in the mountains, just a cable car ride away, which was pretty close to the Institute. Now, laser scanning was pretty cool, but as you can see, the views were better. Now, for every 1 hour of scanning, it generally takes 3 hours to process and stitch together. Even now, we are still linking some of the scans together. And as you can see by one of our stitch scan sections here, there is a density to it that makes it difficult to understand what exactly you are looking at. I spent many hours hidden away in areas of the building that have not had people walk through in years. It was during this time I started to see the potential hidden underneath the dust. However, there is a reason why there are so many scans of this building. The complexity of the Institute was something I have never really seen before. Usually buildings are pretty easy to navigate, but that wasn't the case for us. After our first week of scanning, we finally figured out how to get around and how to get to those hard to find places, even though we had floor plans at our disposal. This trip is what made me interested in the building as a possible thesis. Here you can see that the site sits along the coast of the Mediterranean. As we zoom in closer, you'll see that my site sits in Castellamare di Stabia within the Vale of Mount Vesuvius, and you can see it right here. It's about 35 minutes from the city of Naples, about 15 minutes from Pompeii, and about 15 minutes from a train ride to the Amalfi Coast, which is one of the most beautiful locations in the world. As we zoom in closer, you'll see the site sits along a bluff, allowing for great views of not only the city, but of Mount Vesuvius as well. You can clearly see the Institute with its white roof here at the center of the image. The only major road nearby is east of the Institute, and with only one major road, there is only one point of entry by car. This entry splits into two routes, one for small vehicles and one for buses. There is a separate entrance, but it is only available by foot, and it is a series of switchbacks and long hills to get up to the Institute, which means it's not used very often. Each point of entry is met with an asphalt parking lot to accommodate the different size vehicles. There are two loading docks for the building, mostly used by the kitchen staff. The Institute is also sitting on quite a bit of land, and you can see that in the boundary in red. Here you start to get an understanding of the scale of the building. You can clearly see separate sections of the building with only circulation space to connect them all, and you can see that in blue highlighted. One of the more distinct features of the building is that it is a party for the relationship of the Bay of Naples and Mount Vesuvius, and you can clearly see that represented in the building in this low image. Before anything else, it is important to know the background of the Institute and the history of the area. Now, the year 79 is one of the most famous years in the world with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. You'll see in this diagram that at the time of the eruption, Castellammare di Stabia was simply called Stabia, and it was affected by the eruption, although not as famous as Pompeii. And unlike Pompeii, Stabia was not a port town, but home to large villas owned by the elites of Rome that were mostly in the Senate. These villas were basically the vacation homes and party locations for those elites. Now, the Restoring Ancient Stabia Foundation is a nonprofit organization that wants to build an archaeological park of almost 150 acres where a chunk of Stabia used to be. As of today, it is the largest concentration of well-preserved large seaside Roman villas in the entire Mediterranean. By planting a ring of umbrella pines along the border, it allows for the park to be open while still maintaining a barrier. And as you can see in the diagram that came from the Restoring Ancient Stabia Foundation, the site of the Vesuvian Institute is along the same block. The Institute is already a center for studying abroad, but with no clear purpose other than housing students. There are some classrooms available, but not in heavy use. And the real objective they're trying to achieve is facilitating communication, awareness, and internationalization between universities. The Institute itself is about 50 years old, built in the 70s, but became the Center for Studying Abroad in 2007 due to the lack of present academic settings south of Rome, and because the Restoring Ancient Stabia Foundation took up residence inside. Before that, it was a Salesian college, which is why there are already living and academic settings within the building. The building's skeleton is a ferro-concrete structure with both interior and exterior walls being a tile brick construction. The mechanical system is hydronic heat, but not currently operational, and hasn't been for some time. And due to the mechanical system that doesn't work and located in a hot climate, individual AC units have been installed to the top two floors of housing and in various parts of public space, and can be controlled individually for whatever comfort you want. The building does have a lot of windows, but most of them are in need of repair, and any replacements that have been installed do not do any favors for the architecture of the building. As we take a closer look, the plans of the building illustrate distinct sections for the building. The main entry, where the lobby and the heart of the Institute are located right here. To the northeast is the chapel. To the northwest are the gardens, patio entry, dining hall, living corridors, and the southeast makes up the majority of the academic setting. As I mentioned earlier, there are specific sections connected only by circulation. The building becomes even more unique due to that circulation. The basement is the only floor with completely isolated areas. To get from one end of the building to the other, you must go back up to the ground floor and travel to the next set of stairs in order to go back down. The basement is actually split into 5 distinct sections that make individuals change levels to get to that position. One of the major issues with the current situation is most of the building is unused. The academic side is not open to anyone except for the staff, and much of the gray areas you can see in the drawings are used for storage or just in major need of repair. Now the VI, or the Vesuvian Institute, currently has hotel rooms, dining room, lecture hall, classrooms, a small simulated excavation site, and a chapel. However, in order to accommodate a full functioning archaeology school, it would need some classrooms for archaeology study, then areas for artifact handling or fresco restoration, an active learning space, a laser scan room, a virtual reality room, some computer labs, visible storage, a larger excavation site, and a truck garden. The ground floor currently has the dining room, the lobby, chapel, some seating for the auditorium, and some classrooms. Now this is the view from the main entry where the small parking lot is located. You are greeted with a double height space and a wall of glass on the right. From the back parking lot, there is another entry point, and just beside that is a small simulated dig site, which allows students to learn how to work in and properly unearth artifacts. On the right, you'll see that wall of glass for the lobby. As we leave this space, we venture into the chapel, where you find yourself subject to a powerful conical skylight, which illuminates the space along with floor-to-ceiling windows on the right and clear-story windows on the left. The second path out of the lobby takes us down a hall leading towards the dining hall and stairs leading to the living corridors. Halfway down the hall on the right is a small patio. At the end of the hall, we reach the dining hall entry, which is just down another half level from the lobby. Down these stairs on the right, you'll see some light flooding in. That is the entrance to the large patio and how you get to the rest of the gardens and grounds overlooking the city. Here's the dining hall. On the left are larger windows, which allow you to look out into the bay and Mount Vesuvius. On the right are more clear story windows. The last path out of the lobby leads towards the academic side of the building. Although this hallway is open from the lobby, the set of doors at the end are locked at all times. Again, there's a blend of large illuminating windows and clear stories. Across from the locked doors is the entrance to the upper level seating to the auditorium. On the other side of the auditorium are a few small classrooms which can only be accessed from the exterior. Another unique aspect about this area of the building are the windows that link each classroom. Two end classrooms are able to look down through the windows and see each other. As we move down to the basement, we find the auditorium, the underside of the chapel, which is used as large gathering space and can be used to host parties or meetings. The mechanical room, both the loading docks and laundry facilities, which can be used by the entire institute. The auditorium has its own entry point due to the changing terrain and a series of retaining walls. As you walk in, there's no lobby. Instead, there is only seating looking onto the stage. And just beyond the stage is a series of changing rooms, storage spaces for costumes and props, all of which are falling apart. Directly underneath the lobby is what used to be an old dance studio. As you can see, currently not in use for that purpose, but you can see the mirrors still line the wall on the right, with more clear story windows on the left. Underneath the chapel is a large open space, mostly used for hosting students, or hosting parties by the students and faculty that stay at the institute. And you can see there's a very ornate beam and column system on the ceiling. As we move ourselves underneath the dining room, you can start to see what some of the storage spaces for the institute look like. Just adjacent to that is this old abandoned room, which is directly underneath the outdoor patio. At the end of the space is an open-ended corridor, which slopes up towards the gardens. There is no door in place, which means people and wild animals can move freely indoor to outdoor, or vice versa. Moving to floor one, we start to see the beginning of the living corridors, currently not in use on this floor, however. There are a few office spaces and one classroom located in this section of the building. There are a few more offices overlooking the lobby right here. We also find the lecture hall, which is still currently in use, but some classrooms that are not in use. There's also a long hallway that connects both of these parts of the building, overlooking the lobby. While not used every single day, the lecture hall does get used by various study abroad groups, and some of the classrooms on this level are used as storage while others remain empty and unused. This is the hallway that connects the living corridors and the academic section of the Institute. You'll notice that not only are there clear stories on the ceiling, but there are also some at floor level as well. Floors 2 and 3 are almost completely identical. The only difference is that floor 3 has a small kitchen and dining room for cooking classes. Each floor of living corridors has a lounge space directly across from one of the circulation stairs. However, as of floor 1, floor 2 also is not in use for students to live in currently. This image shows that small kitchen where students may engage in cooking classes if they're interested. And then the small dining room on this floor is exclusively used for the cooking classes so that students may enjoy the meals they prepare. There are also replicas of frescoes painted on the wall that are representational of frescoes found in the surrounding villas. The final floor only has living space, but has the best view of the city and Mount Vesuvius. You can also see Pompeii quite easily. This was the view I had from my room last year. I took this photo on my first day. You can clearly see Mount Vesuvius, but you can also see Pompeii over in the corner here. It's this dark spot surrounded by a lot of vegetation. This is what the typical lounge space across from one of the circulation stairs looks like, overlooking the bay. And then each hotel room typically has a pair of twin beds, a desk, and a closet. And again, there's usually a replica of a fresco from a nearby villa. This section cuts through the lobby and the chapel and displays the minor grade changes for any given floor. Here you can see there is some symmetry to the building, although you can only find it in the living corridors. Cutting through the auditorium and the lecture hall, you'll notice the unique set of sloping here in the building, and it fits nicely with each other, which is why they chose to pair them up. You can also see there is no symmetry among the minor rooms for the institution. Now, ash is why we are here. The site is located just 2.5 miles from Pompeii and was buried in the same eruption of Vesuvius in the year 79. I have used the colors and shades of ash to represent my changes, additions, and alterations to the existing building and site. In order to transform this mid-century building into a school of archaeology, it must undergo some needed updates and restoration as well as new program. Starting on the ground floor, the once well-used chapel is now left abandoned and is being turned into visible storage, which will be open to the public. By having visible storage, it can be used by students and faculty to get a closer view of artifacts from the surrounding area, as well as bring in the public as a modified museum space. Due to the lack of circulation between basement spaces, I have added in an elevator near the lobby that allows accessibility to the basements in this area, which was not possible before. I have also created a new atrium space linking the visible storage and lobby to open up the connection between these two spaces and bring in natural sunlight. Next to the upper level seating of the auditorium, I added another new elevator, which connects all the academic floors that was not possible before this modification. I've also removed one of the walls to the small classrooms on the southeast side of the building to make up more room to accommodate a larger group size. As I mentioned before, the basement does have a lot of secluded spaces that can only be accessed from the ground floor and using separate circulation stairs. Because of this poor circulation, I have added in a new corridor that links these spaces so that you can move between these areas without having to change levels. And you can see that corridor here. There's more visible storage in the space that originally was the gathering space and the old dance studio. The new atrium is also visible from this level. Now, the auditorium, which currently is not in use and in disarray, will be transformed into an active learning classroom where students and faculty can interact through debates, discussion, and exploration of archaeology. In order to achieve this, I am leveling the sloped floor of the seating. The two doors next to the stage at the bottom of the slope have been modified with ramps that lead up to the new level. I have also eliminated several pairs of doors to open up circulation, here and here. By eliminating walls to the small classrooms, I am opening up these spaces to accommodate larger learning classrooms that will allow for a more integrative learning and include a laser scan room and a VR room. The chapel will take on new life as visible storage. This modified space contains the new atrium overlooking the basement visible storage, and my implementation of this new addition is notable but blends seamlessly with the existing conditions, with darker colors representing the ash from Mount Vesuvius. Here's a closer look at that visible storage space. Moving to the basements, beneath the chapel, what was the old gathering space is now more visible storage with the addition of the atrium space and corridor linking the entire basement. The old dance studio would also become visible storage. I've removed one of the walls that isolated the space from circulation, and it creates a more open concept. Although the patio is a large open space currently not in use, but would be an ideal environment for students to learn about and repair frescoes. Converting it into a room that educates students about frescoes, it provides a learning opportunity for students to realize that fresco restoration is delicate and messy. This space is perfect to foster that specific environment. Since I'm trying to preserve the existing conditions of the building, you will notice that the cable tray is left exposed so that all newly installed lights can gain power. The lights only minimally impact the building because they can be attached to the concrete by a thin cable. Below the dining room is a space that is used for storage, but is now being converted into a classroom where students will learn how to properly care for and handle artifacts found in local dig sites. In this room, again, you'll see that lights are attached to a thin cable to minimize damage to existing conditions. On the right side, fume hoods are visible. And now, fume hoods are commonly found in rooms that handle artifacts, and in order to minimize the impact from the building, these fume hoods can be connected to the ventilation that is in the kitchen directly above this room. What once was an auditorium for putting on plays is now an active learning classroom for a more in-depth learning experience. Each table has a computer for groups to embark on a more engaging question that might be given to them to figure out. Along the walls, you see the floor does not quite connect and light is pouring out instead. This modification allows users of the space to access more light, but also tells the story of what the space used to be and what has been done to access a more usable floor instead of a gradual slope that existed beforehand. While there are only a few changes to this level, it brings in a whole new learning space that most students would not have a chance to use in their respective universities. The first room removes two existing walls so that the room can be used to teach students how to laser scan, which is an amazing way to recreate an archaeological site. Laser scanning is a great way to get an almost perfect recreation of a space. By learning how to operate a scanner, students will have an advantage over other candidates for possible future jobs. And while the space may not have intricate paths or walls, the unique double height space makes for a great first-time use of gathering scan data. You can also see where one of the existing walls used to be by black steel plates I've placed in its stead. This last room will only remove one wall to create a larger classroom where students can take the scan data from the other room and transfer it to a computer to get a virtual reality experience. So again, partnered with the room next door, you just transfer the scan data to a computer and students will be able to switch between the scanner and virtual reality where they can utilize the space that has been scanned. The real world application of this technology is quite superior because you are able to access a previously scanned dig site repeatedly rather than visiting the site in person. This allows for a great accessibility so that you can be viewing the dig sites, which might not be viewed otherwise due to travel or poor weather conditions. Besides modifications to the building, there are a few repairs that need to be addressed in order for the school to properly function. First, many of the windows need to be repaired or replaced due to old age and weathering. The next repair that's required is the mechanical system needs to be updated since currently it does not work. And lastly, the extensive land of asphalt, which is used for parking and as soccer fields, will need to be updated into a usable setting for the Institute. So first off are the windows. Currently, they are 1/4-inch panes attached to a steel frame. And instead, I'd replace them with Pilkington's fascia vacuum glazing, which offers the same thermal performance as conventional double glazing, with only 1/4 thickness and 2/3 of the weight. As a vacuum, even a small one, it's much more effective at minimizing conduction and convection heat losses. And with a low thickness and good acoustic performance, it makes it ideal to use in a historic building, offering a replacement to windows that are in the original design. It may even allow the use of original frames if these are in reasonable or repairable condition. So on the left here is the current condition with 1/4-inch panes and a glass putty and steel tees. On the right side, you'll see the Pilkington's fascia offers the same thickness but has a vacuum in between. Now, replacing the mechanical system, I had put in place a variable refrigeration flow unit, which allows cooling and heating and can be conditioned by single or multiple outdoor condensing units. And it can be circulated within the building to multiple indoor units. And by operating at varying speeds, it allows for energy savings at specific load conditions, and it would also be able to reuse the existing pipe system from the hydronic heat. Lastly are the abandoned soccer fields and locker rooms. They can be used as truck gardens and as an excavation site. Now, the abandoned soccer field and locker rooms take up approximately half of the land that the Institute owns. In its current state, it is a complete waste of space, and by turning it into a truck garden, it would be able to be utilized by the kitchen staff so that they can grow fresh fruits and vegetables that would be fed to the staff, students, and faculty daily. This change is economical for the kitchen staff and eco-friendly, as it would allow for gray water to be reused from the building. It would also be advantageous to dig down in this space and expose potential archaeological finds that most likely exist. Again, this is where a lot of old Roman villas used to be, so it is likely that there could be something underneath this land. Now, this would not only be an added feature to this historic site, but it would also be a prime opportunity for hands-on learning. Here is the outline of the asphalt and locker rooms in red. This section is actually up a level from the parking lot and can only be accessed if you walk upstairs to this level. However, the locker rooms are located at ground level on the parking lot. Displayed in this image is an aerial representation of what it could possibly look like as an excavation site and garden. You'll notice that the gardens along the bluff on the other side of the building would also likely have ruins buried underneath meters of ash as well. This render represents the possibility of those ruins just a few meters underground. Now, this image was taken from one of the nearby villas. It depicts the layers of ash that have been excavated. You can see that it is gray in color right here. Now, this is the reason why I have used colors and shades of ash to represent my changes, additions, and alterations to the existing building and site. Ash is why we are here. Both of these images are from the ruins of the same villa, as well as this one. In the background, you can see those different grade changes of ash. This plan represents possible ruins that could be exposed from the layers of ash covering them. There are a few modifications that would be made to the retaining wall and major modifications made to the current locker rooms. By opening up the retaining wall, it allows for students to walk directly into the excavation site rather than having to take stairs up and over the wall to get there. And you can see the wall removed right here. The locker rooms, however, need to go through more needed changes by removing the doors from the parking lots and the walls within and opening it back up on the excavation side in order to create office space and storage. This space would be used to store various excavation tools, and they both overlook the ruins. This section gives you an idea of how far down the ruins might be beneath layers of ash. And at the center, you can see that the office space does overlook the excavation site quite nicely. Here's what the entrance of the dig might look like. And by opening up the retaining wall right here, it allows individuals to enter the dig without having to go up and over the wall. On the left, you'll notice what used to be the old locker rooms. I replaced the wall and added clear stories that mirror the Institute's original design. Walking through the entrance, you look directly down into the site, and up above, you'll notice a line of trees that outline the garden overlooking the dig. From inside the office space, due to its new construction, it is dark in color, but brings in a lot of natural light. This design allows faculty and researchers to look down in from the office to watch over students. As we move down into the dig site, the environment changes from concrete walls to a natural and earthly setting. By establishing a dig site on the premise, students and faculty will easily be able to engage in hands-on learning. While the surrounding villas and towns that are already excavated and worked on, this dig site is brand new and would allow for students and faculty to be the first to uncover history. Here's another dig site view just to get a better understanding of its complexity. A truck garden overlooks the newly formed dig sites and allows the kitchen staff to use fresh fruits and vegetables in the daily meals fed to the students and researchers. This is eco-friendly as it would be able to use the gray water from the building. What is important to note from this project is that history can be preserved while revitalizing the original architecture with modern updates and designs. This building will not only remain a historical landmark, but will become an institute where history is uncovered and made by the archaeology school. The updates I have made to the institute provide better circulation and eco-friendly alternatives that did not exist before. The defining feature of the institute will be the dig site that is located on the premise. This will not only attract researchers, students, and faculty from across the world, but it will also provide artifacts that can be viewed by the public in the visible storage I have integrated. I've transformed this building from a historical landmark into a building that will become a part of history for years to come. Ash is why we are here, and it is time to celebrate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. What I'd like to propose is that the three faculty that would have worked with Ben would take a break for a while here and make some closing comments at the end of the session. But I'd like to turn to our four guest reviewers to have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments, and not wait until the very end for them to have a chance to speak. So our four guest reviewers, hopefully we can unmute your mics and hear some questions or comments from you. Aparna?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I think the presentation was extremely crisp, and I was able to get a complete understanding of what you propose and what the existing conditions are. It's exciting that you're looking at a prospect of a life archaeology site combining with a place of learning, which I think would be unique in its own sense. My question to you was, did you explore where this would be, say, 5 or 10 years down the line when the proposed dig actually becomes a tourist site, and then you have an influx of, say, people from all over the world coming in? Then how does the institute and how does the architecture respond to completely new needs? Right now, it's only a place of learning. So, did you think about or think along those lines? And the second thing is there any proposed elevational change or treatment from what it is right now, other than the technological change to the window and the way the windows are being done? Other than that, are you looking at giving it some identity from the exterior? These are the two questions that I have. Thank you. Yeah, so I was just asking you if the dig actually becomes a successful dig where you have a lot of ancient relics excavated, it would turn into a tourist spot. And how would your architecture, the way you're designing it right now, respond to new needs a couple of years down the line? How would you have public interaction happening at the same time as learning is happening, at the same time as the dig is, simultaneously being done? That was one. And the second was about the elevational treatment, if there is any elevational treatment proposed.
Yeah, so first off, it probably would not be a tourist attraction, at least not until it was fully excavated, which would be a long time, quite possibly. So it would just be for students and researchers just to start to uncover history as it emerges out of the ash. And how it responds to the building. Well, currently there are a few villas nearby, but with this possibly being an archaeology site, it offers a great opportunity for the students and researchers not have to travel every single day, and they can just walk outside right into a dig site. So it would just be a great opportunity. As for elevation changes, probably wouldn't be many apart from digging down into what could be an archaeology site. That would slowly be excavated over years to come. So the garden, which is up above, would potentially get smaller and smaller as more site is excavated.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Thank you so much. Great work.
Thank you, Aparna. Hopefully he was able to answer some of your questions there. Although I think you're also in terms of elevation, we're also asking about, did he make changes to the exterior of the old building to transform it in some way? I don't know if you could answer that one in some way, Ben.
Yeah, I'm trying to preserve the building as it is, so I'm not making any major changes to the exterior of the building. Anything that I am doing, I'm implementing with dark concrete or charcoal brick just to match the ash that fell from Vesuvius. So the only major changes to the building would be very apparent because the light color of the concrete and the red brick up against a dark concrete and dark brick they contrast quite a bit. So those are the only major changes I'd make to the exterior.
Thank you, Ben. So Palmyra, are you out there?
Yes, actually, just on that, this, correct me if I'm wrong, because you sort of went through a lot of information, but this part right here is an addition on the exterior, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So I guess, I applaud you on your presentation and the attention to detail. There is, however, a very clear, it's not that clear, but fairly clear reading of distinct volumes on the side. And so when you're adding the elevator and this connective element in the basement between what was previously the chapel and the meeting space and then the new fresco room, I think back to Aparna's question, it's an important place where you may materially distinguish what you've added from what pre-existed, but you are changing the way the building is read. And so I wonder what your attitude is towards that. And also, did you make a blanket decision to always call out any changes? So in the classroom, you've added the black steel, and you're not really painting it in any way to make it disappear. I wonder, to me, there is less importance in calling out the fact that there used to be a demising wall there and calling out the difference between the new part of the building that you've added. So is there any hierarchy in the way in which you've decided to call out the difference between additions and existing pieces of the building? And cases where you decided that it's not important to do so, to call that out? And are there any places other than the auditorium where things are sort of slipping or missing one another? There are gaps that call attention to what's added besides the material change?
To answer that right now, the auditorium is the only place where I've kind of removed a chunk, like the floor up against the wall, just because I found it a lot harder to show what the existing condition used to be. So by removing a section of the floor up against the wall, that was my way of calling attention to that. But by the rest, I'm more often than not removing something. So I'm trying to call attention to detail with that by adding in like those black steel plates where walls used to be, or a darker color if they had to rip up a floor. I kind of mentioned at the beginning that students are here to learn about not only the current culture of Italy, but also the ancient. And so I'm using this building as a representation that the building is the ancient part of Italy, and my new additions are the current. And so I'm trying to keep them very distinct from each other and separate them as much as possible.
Except that it isn't the ancient part of Italy. I mean, you literally have the ancient part of Italy pretty close by. I mean, does a building from the 50s or 60s, I forget when it was from, deserve the same sort of reverence that you would otherwise give to an archaeological site?
I mean, you are right. It is definitely not ancient, especially with the villas close by. But as for myself, I would just use it as a representation for that, so that I can clearly define the new additions I've made to the building.
I would love to build on that question that Palmyra just asked about the reverence that's paid to the mid-century modern architecture. And first, do you want to echo also the other critics' comments about your very clear and meticulous presentation? I felt like I was reading a classic architectural textbook definition, or like I was having the experience of like really learning the architecture from you. So I really appreciate that. You were so thorough and complete in your orientation, in your efforts to orient us to the existing conditions. And I understand the approach. You clearly love the building. Your approach is really, really discreet and disturbs the existing conditions as found as little as possible. But that said, so I'm just wondering about, so this is a school, right? And you say students and school, sort of generally speaking. I'm making an assumption that they're university students because you're a university student and your desire to work on this came from a personal interaction you had with this building and excitement around like laser scanning and getting into the world of documenting this particular building. So I'm getting around to my question, which is sort of two-parter. Relative to what Palmyra was just saying about the sort of like hesitance to intervene in any way in the building, it's as found, seems to me to miss an opportunity, which is really exciting about architecture and archaeology in the ancient world, where like one of the things that's so exciting, so I haven't been to Rome, but I've been to Athens, where and I'm walking down the block and there's, you know, the entire agora. So it's the way that the ancient world interlaces with our modern experience. I think that's so exciting. And so I feel like there's a bit of a missed opportunity. And I wonder if you could talk about whether or not you considered those sort of like moments of revelation in the building itself, given that it's probably sitting on top of ruins, as you yourself point out in the truck garden area. And then the other part of the question, which is probably less rambly, is just, like, who are the students? Are they high school students? Do they come from all around the world? Do they travel to this school to learn about archaeology? Is there a resident cohort that's there for a 4-year degree? And that is related to this sort of like moments of revelation, because I think one thing a school has a responsibility to do is to kindle desire amongst its students to sort of get engaged with the subject. But again, I think sort of these moments of reveal or tantalizing that would be possible on a site like this could be really implemented to that end. So anyways, a bunch of comments and questions in there for you.
Sure. To answer the second question right away, study abroad students, I kind of mentioned as a general term, there are high schools that allow studying abroad programs this extensively, but mostly you see it in universities. And when I was there a year ago, UW was there, but then there was also Cornell, University from Russia. And I heard a lot of stories from a group that was there from France. So they do come from all over the globe to stay at this institute and go out and survey the different archaeological sites in the area, specifically Pompeii and the surrounding villas. But the attention to the site as opposed from the building, as I mentioned, there's a lot of views from the building, and it would be very easy from inside the building to look out to the dig site and into the truck garden area. But overall, I'm not trying to necessarily morph the two together. I would like to keep them a little bit separate, just because one is a place of learning and living while another is hands-on. and you can actually start to get down into the dirt and physically learn rather than have to sit at a table. So I do want to completely separate those two distinct kind of classroom settings.
Except for that, if I could just add one thing, you do sort of lace the building with what you call visible storage, which to me is a gesture of revelation that, you know, like, here's all the stuff we found. You can come look at it in a lot of different rooms in the building. So you do seem to, you express a desire to intermingle findings with student experience, but it's done in a sort of like exhibit format rather than sort of like, the architecture doesn't do it. You provide a room and put furniture in the room to do the job, that I think actually an attention to the building envelope and its relationship to the existing site could do.
Like Trudy, this is Jim Shield speaking. You're pointing out that in this rendering before us, out the window, 10, 15 feet down, that's probably a fabulous Roman villa ruin. And it, you know, it could be spectacular to have that kind of interweaving here,
Right?
you know, in and amongst these existing building courtyards. So I appreciate that idea.
Another thing I would ask is, I noticed that you're trying to give new purpose to spaces that are underused right now. But you have, I mean, this is sort of a hypothetical project. You have the opportunity to reconceptualize the program, and presumably one of the reasons why the basement is not connected is because each one of these volumes is meant to function as a unit. And so if you have a hotel, you're in the space of the hotel and you go up and down and you use the basement only if you're part of that program. And so A, why not reconceptualize the program more thoroughly? And B, why not make this entire intervention underground? You know, I don't necessarily understand why you need to have this double height space. I'm still sort of not sure how this reads on the outside. And you can reorient the entire new intervention that you made to the dig site. Make that your new entry to the building, make that the new sort of elevation, the new front, and sort of have everything, all the spaces you have repurposed, essentially connected with an underground network, occasionally popping out into this space, for example, but with an interior gesture of connectivity. Maybe you open up a stair in the middle of the space or something like that. And so you really reorient your intervention to what you yourself said is sort of the crux of your proposal, which is the new dig site to the east.
It's certainly a compelling thought to have adjusted this image so that it's on the other side facing the dig. And as far as what the space is supposed to be, currently the basement, like I mentioned, is mostly unused, but there are a lot of great opportunities to open up those spaces as new classrooms. But because the basement is so isolated, having to walk up to a new level and back down to, let's say, you're in the artifact handling room, I'd have to go up a level, over and then down to get to where some of the visible storage is in the basement. Opening up a corridor to kind of link everything makes it a lot easier for students and researchers, if they have questions, just to walk over and take a look at something up close, rather than have to do a whole lot of walking to get there. And the space that you can see in front of you is where that connection starts. And by opening up that atrium space up in the lobby, going into the chapel is, again, just a small little hallway circulation. And by opening it up across the entire lobby, it allows for not only natural sunlight to fall in, but when you walk in, you're able to look directly at the visible storage and all the artifacts found from the surrounding areas. And so opening it up to the other side, as compelling as that is, in my scenario, it wouldn't quite allow for the same reveal as you walk in from that specific view, just because of where the chapel is located compared to the lobby itself. So I was looking at it as more, as you walk into the main doors, you are able to see right to the artifacts found from possibly the site itself on the grounds.
Ben, I wanted to echo some of the comments of the other reviewers and maybe just sort of clarify one thing that might help you as you start to write this up, or perhaps the document is written and ready already to submit to the graduate school. But I'd like to applaud you on taking on just an enormous and really complicated project. And I think that the extensive research and development that you've done really reads in this thorough presentation. And for me, you know, just sort of listening to you sort of meticulously move through all of these layers highlighted how complicated it actually all is, right? And it still is complicated. It's this mashup of styles and moments, from frescoes to, you know, the 70s to AC units. And I just think that what would be really helpful as you write it up, and even to start off with when you discuss this with other people, is your preservation ethic, and, you know, really articulating sort of what is sacred to you. Because for me, I'm seeing on the one hand, you have this sort of attachment to the original building, the mid-century modern building, and then another attachment to sort of utility or this new function. And maybe there are other things that you're really invested in, like energy efficiency, for instance. So at the very end, you sort of said, I want to keep it as is, the building as is, but we didn't hear that until the end of your presentation. So I think what would be really helpful is to come up with a code of design moves, even, you know, like when we have this problem, I do this. Whenever you add on to a new volume, it turns gray. That's a good example of sort of if this, then what? And it might just help to sort of diagram, or maybe you could provide some tables, but just sort of help your reviewers visualize all of the various ways that you'll be manipulating this building. Because for me, it's a really compelling proposal, and it's also still very complicated. And I think that you could use some design language to sort of help make it clear for everyone who looks at the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carey. I wanted to save a few minutes here so the faculty that have worked for the semester with Ben could make a few comments. Jim Wasley, are you out there, and have any summary comments after a semester of working with Ben?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And what a tremendous amount of work I know that you have done. I'm not familiar myself with the scanning technology, but as you said, you did 700 plus scans to stitch this together, and just wrestling with the complexity of it for you has been a real education. I hope that resource, this model, and this is my understanding, that this will go back to the Institute and become a tool that will help them actually conceive of a future for this building, whether it's your future or somebody else's. You've done them a huge service by generating this research. I also think it's interesting, reflecting on it, how, and this is the nature of design, that the last big move you did to open up this archaeological dig around the building reframes everything. And that's worth reflecting on and thinking about for the future, because I think you did a really wonderful job of reframing it. And the suggestion I heard just a minute ago was that in this view, it's not so much changing our perspective as just continuing the dig, imagining, you know, at some point, everything around the building becomes an archaeological site, and this lawn that we see out is also revealed to be a landscape 10 feet lower down, and your window into the basement takes on a whole new life as a way that the ground floor flows out. I just think it's a natural progression of what you're doing, and so powerful that this big idea came at the end to really reframe this as a landscape problem as much as a building restoration problem. So tremendous amount of work on a very daunting site. Thank you for having me.
And William, are you out there?
Yes. Ben, was great to work with you in Italy on this project. And yes, we'll be giving this data back to the Vesuvian Institute and working with them in the future to try to make this facility more well used than it currently is. Right now, students of all ages and areas around the world come, but there's no on-site staff teaching any particular courses. It's pretty much whoever reserves the space and uses it has the opportunity to bring in their own course program, everything from music schools to acting to archaeology, architecture, etc. And there's plenty of excavation opportunities in the area should they exhaust the back area with doing a proper dig and finding everything that's there, so to speak. There is so much unearthed in this area. It's just mind-boggling. It would take a century to do it all properly. And then also looking at the moves that Ben has done to note the changes within the building. Granted, this building is relatively new, but so quickly we lose what did we change. There's already been alterations to this building in its lifetime, and we note them as we walked around the building and looked at the set of plans we were given. Nothing matched. There's many things added. And I see this practice going on in other buildings in and around Italy where they've taken a monastery or convent or something like that, but they need to repurpose it to be a museum so it can remain in existence. So they'll take out walls, but they have this practice of leaving the footprint in the floor or the ceiling to show what had gone on beforehand. And I think it's a very useful tool. It gives the people that are experiencing the space, not only to look at the artifacts that are on display, but also to see the life cycle of the building. And here we have an opportunity to really, log that, because it's not that old. And if we start doing it now and set that precedent and also make people mindful of these changes that go on, it gives you a better appreciation for what's happened before. Because as they go down and look at these archaeological digs, you start trying to recreate from a simple footprint what's happening. So I think, this has been very helpful, very useful. And I think that, the skills that Ben picked up, having to do 700 laser scans, will do him good justice in the future.
Thank you, William. As committee chair, I also want to respect some of the other historic preservation students that are out there. I've seen watching the presentation, who are thinking about their own future thesis or final studio project. And I think we definitely are in a period in preservation where the scanning has really taken over in the documentation of existing buildings. At the same time, I want to provide a warning that comes from Ben's experience. That is, we've heard several times that there were 700 scans that Ben did with some other students there. And, we don't have I don't have a record here of how long each scan took. But let me just say that each scan might have taken an hour, right? And then Ben's estimate that for every hour of scanning, we need 3 hours of Revit processing, in which we're tracing points in a cloud to determine the dome beyond, for example, or a faceted column. Well, you just do the math, and that's 2,100 hours of Revit work. And if you divide by 40-hour weeks, that's 52.5 weeks. So, it is kind of evident that Ben, the scanning thing was probably, and processing was many more hours than you could reasonably jam into your thesis. You had some help, you had some good help early in the semester with some of your past colleagues, but finally they had to give up and move on to their own lives, and you were left alone here. And it's been, I think the model is still definitely not done. Not even close, because there are evidently 52.5 weeks of processing involved in the whole thing. So I'm offering that as a warning to future preservation students. Don't think that scanning is a nirvana here, that it's some quick blessing. So just be careful of that, and try the math when you're doing scans, that you've got, if you spend 40 hours doing scans, you've got a lot of processing work before you could even have your first model. Other than that, it's been Real pleasure to watch you struggle with that, Ben. And I want to thank you for your hard effort here. I want to open it up now. Are there other comments or questions from visitors who'd like to make a comment before we close the day?
I'll just ask a question of William, since we're talking about preservation and scanning. It seems as if last semester represented a breakthrough in the Institute in terms of the new approaches to translating from clouds into models. I guess it's a question for both you, Ben, and William. Were you part of that revolution, or William, is there a brighter future for this in the already at hand?
Well, laser scanning is simply a tool. You can still get out your tape measure and take photos, etc. And you have to pick and choose what battles you're focusing on when it comes to laser scanning. You could go full depth on this thing and do a complete building information model with all the piping and everything that you could pick up with the scan data. As far as a silver bullet of how to get to the essence of what you're looking for or trying to analyze, well, that takes basically editing on your own part to choose and distill down, what do I need from this scan data? I can go crazy, but I can also do a quick snapshot just to understand what's happening. And it's like anything else. Tools can do a lot of things, and this is only a tool. You just have to learn how to wield it judiciously.
But I think William, you might say, and Ben, you would say that I don't think the school has developed any magic bullets to turn this 2,100 hours into 10 hours. That hasn't actually happened. So that's part of my warning to our students, that if you're planning on scanning a big complicated building, you really need to sit down with a pencil and work out a schedule, and perhaps come up with some team members that's going to help you work on that, because you're not going to do 2,100 hours of processing. But we're at the end of our day for the spring 2020 thesis, and I'd like to just finish up by really thanking our reviewers who've joined us online from around the world to comment, and I really want to thank you for some cogent and really well-informed criticism today. And I'd like to thank all the students and guests who were here with us online, and look forward to seeing you at future thesis days in coming years. So thank you very much, and we're signing off for the afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome job, Ben.
Congratulations.
Thanks.